fellow at Freiburg Institute for Advanced Studies, University of Freiburg, Germany. Especially she is interested in language contact in Southeast Asia, English in ASEAN, language and law and higher education. Her area of interest includes, she has a rich publication history, and some of the publication includes English in Southeast Asia and ASEAN, transformation of language habitats, Routledge, co-authored with Gerhard Leitner. It was published in 2021. And similarly, Communicating with Asia, the Future of English as a Global Language, Cambridge University Press. It was co-authored, co-edited with, again, Gerhard Leitner and Hans-Georg Wolf. And articles in journals such as English Today, World Englishes, Higher Education Quarterly, and Multilingualism. She is currently president of International Association of Applied Linguistics and Humboldt Ambassador Scientist, Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, Germany. Then we'll be just spending very useful time with her within an hour. Now, over to you, Professor Hashim.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Jadu. Yeah. Okay, firstly, I would like to thank Dr. Janat Singh for the invitation to present at this conference. I'm very happy to be here with you, even though it's virtual. The topic of my presentation is English in ASEAN, and I will talk about models, norms, and implications for ELT. Yeah? This is one of the areas that I've been working on lately, and I'm very interested in actually in looking at language aspects, language policy in the ASEAN region, and I'm very much involved in the ASEAN higher education community. So I feel that there is an opportunity to actually contribute, towards language policy and language practice in the region. So this particular presentation will cover the role of English in the region. I will talk about policies in general pertaining to English. I will say a little bit about issues surrounding the norms of English use in ASEAN. I will talk about some local, regional, and global perspectives. A focus on national language after independence, for example, regional aspects like the development of an ASEAN community, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and the use of English as the official language, global perspectives, English needs for the international arena. Yeah. So I'll also talk a little bit about tensions between national and regional varieties. What has been discussed among scholars pertaining to which kind of English should be actually taught in the classroom. I will end by talking about implications for ELT and what policymakers, applied linguists, and ELT practitioners in ASEAN could actually do in terms of the issue of English language teaching and learning, curriculum and teaching materials, and also regarding what do we do about multilingualism. Okay, for those of you who are not so familiar with this particular region, you can see the map that we have. This is Southeast Asia and ASEAN. Southeast Asia, you can see we have 11 countries indicated by that circle. ASEAN actually consists of 10 of these 11 countries. So you can see that we've got, from the north, we've got Myanmar, we've got Vietnam, we've got Laos, we've got Cambodia, we've got Thailand. Further south, we've got Malaysia, and then we've got Indonesia, this whole stretch of islands. And then you can see Philippines there as well. Timor-Leste is also in the circle. It's part of Southeast Asia, but it's not part of ASEAN. So you can see that we are flanked on the left-hand side by the Bay of Bengal, on the right-hand side by the South China Sea. So I'll be talking mainly about this particular region, focusing on on a few countries in particular. If you look at this region, it's very diverse. We've got about 600 million people in 10 countries, 10 ASEAN countries. And the ASEAN countries are Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Philippines, Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and Indonesia. So all these different countries, they've gone through different colonial histories. So we've had actually Portugal has been in the region, the Netherlands, Spain, Britain, USA, Japan, India, China, Arabia, and Middle East, and all of them have left their traces. You can find communities speaking some of these languages in Southeast Asia, and they have left actually their languages. For example, we've got the Portuguese Kristang community in Malaysia. We've got some people who can still understand a bit of Dutch, yeah? And English is widely spoken in the former colonial, in the former colonies of Britain. So the high levels of diversity then actually carry over into the linguistic habitat. So you can see all the different languages which are used in the different countries in the region. And because this region is located at the sea routes that connect East Asia, East Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, it was actually part of a major trade network between the 7th and 17th century. It was a geopolitical hub. It enabled the exchanges of political systems and goods and services, cultures, religions, languages, and people. But today it is actually more than just a transit region. It's a geopolitical entity. We've got the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and a lot is being done in the area of economics, politics, and social culture. And that particular region is pursuing its own priorities. Okay, looking a little bit at the history of English. So English actually came into contact with a wide range of languages in different locations during the colonial period. We have etymological dictionaries. We've got examples, for example, in the Oxford English Dictionary, we've got words that went to English from Malay, from Indian languages, from Chinese languages, for example. So English actually borrowed from other languages in former colonies and assimilated those words. So you've got words like amok, which is actually a word which came from Malaya. It's a Malay word which has gone into the English language. It's accepted as an English word. Now we've got words like ketchup, which came from kicap, which is either Chinese or Malay. Then we've got words like kampong, which is from Malay, yeah? And other such examples. But in the region itself, you can see the development of new varieties. So in countries that were former colonies of Britain, you can see established varieties of English in Malaysia and Singapore, in Brunei, for example. So, and there's a tremendous amount of multilingualism. So you get a mix of various languages coming into contact with English. But you would say that, like many parts of the world, English is the most powerful external language today. In the past, perhaps French played a key role in Vietnam, for example. Dutch was a language that was found in Indonesia, but today, English is the most powerful external language. And we've got the role of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which is ASEAN, which is what I'll be talking about. So the ASEAN itself made English the official language of ASEAN. So that actually led to greater focus on English. So we see the growth and of English in the different national environments, yeah. And you see the rise of what we might call an ASEAN lingua franca, English as a lingua franca in ASEAN. So just to elaborate a bit more about ASEAN, it's all the countries are at different stages of nation building. You've got a variety of languages, religions, political and legal cultures. Yeah, we're an association of Southeast Asian nations, but actually we're very diverse. We've got very diverse political cultures. We've got very diverse legal cultures. Some of us follow the British common law, for example. Some of us follow a different system. Yeah, and then the five founding members were Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and Philippines. They formed ASEAN in 1967. And then after that, other countries were admitted. We've got Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos. They were admitted in the 1990s, yeah? And it was decided actually that English would be the working language and the lingua franca of the region without much debate. Yeah, there was no discussion. It was just accepted that English would be the lingua franca, and it's actually in the charter, in the ASEAN Charter, Article 34. So initially, you might say that English has been considered the language of pragmatism, but there has been some work that has looked at the English spoken by ASEAN speakers to see whether actually there are many commonalities that have developed and whether it is actually more than a language of pragmatism today, especially after ASEAN became a community in 2015. In terms of development of English, if you look at all the education systems in the region, English has played more and more of an important role. Initially, for some countries, English was taught in the secondary schools, but now in all the countries, English is taught in the primary schools. It has become the compulsory subject in the primary curriculum. It would, I think, it's true to say that it's become the most important foreign language or second language in all ASEAN countries. Some years ago, this wasn't the case, but now you could say that English has become the most important foreign language or second language in ASEAN. Then the issue of medium of instruction also has been actually discussed a lot in some countries. For example, in Malaysia, we've got the implementation of English as a medium of instruction for mathematics and science in 2002. And then this went on for about 10 years. And in 2012, we switched back to the use of Malay for teaching mathematics and science. So it's actually a subject of much debate. Yeah? What subjects should be taught in English? How much English should be incorporated? Yeah, but it is actually used in official meetings in the region. It is common in popular music. It's common in the culture, in the sports, and in the media. And because you've got international agencies like the World Bank, the United Nations, yeah, and this actually requires people to be able to speak English to partner in any of their programs. In higher education, there's a lot that's happening in the region, internationalization of higher education and education in general, and the spread of English actually has impacted education systems in the region. It's considered to be key to developing a global community. So therefore, it's crucial to be able to communicate in English because all the ASEAN meetings are conducted in English. And just like what you have in Europe with the Bologna process, in ASEAN, actually, there is currently the efforts to create a common higher education space. So there are many programs that are trying to facilitate mobility, credit transfers across universities in ASEAN. So and English is a language that's used. So according to Kirkpatrick, there are three driving forces behind the use of English. The international campuses in ASEAN, you've got international universities setting up campuses in different countries like University of Nottingham in Malaysia, yeah, Monash in Malaysia. We've got international partnerships and cooperation with English-speaking countries. We sign MOUs, yeah, MOAs with different partners. And we've also got the setup of regional universities to cater for diverse student market. So what countries which have been sending countries have also becoming receiving countries. So like Malaysia is one of the countries that aims to be a higher education hub in the region. So we have set up also mechanisms and processes that would enable us to do so. And English is the language used in all these cases, yeah? So just to talk a little bit about the kind of English that we have, because this will actually impact on the choice for pedagogy and the implications for ELT. So if you look at English in Southeast Asia and the national varieties that exist, you could say that there are basically two trends here. Both of these trends are moving away from native speaker norms. You've got the developing stable national varieties, especially in former Anglophone colonies. And so you've got Singapore English, Malaysian English, Philippine English, yeah. And you might also say that some studies have shown that there's the rise of common features and of the spread of some others across the region that points to the possibility of a consensual variety of English. So some work has been done on English in the region in ASEAN, and the works have actually highlighted certain features which are used by all ASEAN speakers. So that actually points towards common features that are used, and perhaps a consensual variety of English. So you find some unique phonological and grammatical features, some common ones across different varieties. For example, some South Asian varieties of English share similar phonological features. For example, there's an absence of the schwa, yeah? The monophthongization of diphthongs, so you have shorter vowels. You have the reduction of final consonant clusters. In some cases, removal of consonant clusters, yeah? And then the shift in stress placement, and mostly it's syllable time rather than stress time. Syllable time, that means you give equal duration for every syllable that's used. So if you look at the varieties of English that are found, you find non-standard use of plural forms for uncountable nouns, for example. You've got the use of irregular plurals, yeah? A tendency to use the plural form for uncountable nouns, you know, like equipments and informations, luggages and stuffs, yeah? And speakers often find the system of question tag in standard British English extremely difficult, and they replace it in one or several ways in the Southeast Asian varieties of English. So we can see some of these common features in all the different varieties of English. So how does that impact on actually English language teaching, and what we see should be actually incorporated in the English language classroom? Huh? Okay, so in general, I would like to summarize the language policies in ASEAN. What's happening over the last so many years? You can see that all countries have developed national language and educational policies. All of them have implemented this, yeah? And if you look at all the different countries, there's not much provision for the teaching of languages from neighboring countries. So for example, in Malaysia, I think I can clearly see a reduction in the teaching of neighboring languages such as Filipino or Thai or Lao, or, you know, I think there was more in the past, but this actually has decreased. So for example, Thai and Filipino are only taught in their own country, but rarely taught in Malaysia, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. In Malaysia, it's found in the programs for Southeast Asian studies, but apart from that, offered as an elective, I think it's not very common anymore, yeah? So of the many languages that could be chosen, usually only the dominant or politically relevant languages are selected. In Malaysia, it would be Mandarin or Tamil. The second thing you can observe is that all countries have promoted a local language as a national language. So after independence, all the countries actually promoted a local language as a national language. And countries differ, you know, because there are many local languages that could be selected. So many of them choose the language that's spoken by the majority in the population. Indonesia is an exception because Malay is not the largest language in Indonesia when it was selected, yeah. But as in all the policies, you can see that the national language, with the selection of a national language, eventually it amounts to a form of bilingualism, with English and the national language given prominence and a marginal consideration of other local languages. The third one, generalization, is that all countries include in their policies the issues of medium instruction and the choice of foreign languages. So the normal solution as to which should be the medium of instruction is the national language. That's the normal solution. But some other languages are chosen in some regions. For example, Malay could be used in southern Thailand, where you have a big Malay-speaking community. And then we've got Chinese spoken in the Chinese schools and Tamil spoken in the Indian schools in Malaysia. English is a very frequent choice as the second language or foreign language because of the belief in general that it guarantees participation in the socio-economic domain, access to jobs, access to knowledge. Very often it is restricted to subjects like mathematics and sciences, but in higher education, I think throughout the region, you can see that it has become predominant at the university So for the early post-independent language block chosen in the Philippines, Thai in Thailand, but for Singapore, English is considered the most important official language. And then we've got Malay, Tamil, and Mandarin labeled as mother tongues. Yeah. Then others have chosen the national language, but then there's the constant struggle about the status and use of English, especially in education. Okay, so we've talked about English, but what about multilingualism in the region? Yeah, if you look at the ASEAN Charter, it says ASEAN seeks to inculcate respect for the different languages, for the different cultures, languages, and religions of the peoples of ASEAN, while emphasizing their common values in the spirit of unity in diversity. This is what it says in the ASEAN Charter. Yeah, so this therefore implies that ASEAN will have to take a new look at the language education policy to allow for multilingualism and respect for the mother tongues. So what has been done in terms of this, promoting multilingualism and also respecting mother tongues? Has there been the implementation of mother tongue-based language policy in education? Yeah, what has been incorporated as policies and guidelines to promote multilingualism? So what you see basically is the one nation, one language ideology, and then the pragmatic rationale for language learning. And the pragmatic rationale, of course, always favors English as the second most important language to be taught. And this is often in conflict with the multilingual realities of all these nations. So next I talk about what are the implications, what type of English should we focus on? So it has been mentioned that there are three different views here. The first is the maintenance of an exonormative native English model, which is still very much popular in some of the countries in the region, especially the expanding circle countries. Yeah, they favor still the exonormative model. They favor native speakers. Yeah, the second one is the choice of a local variety or English's model, following the outer circle concept. Yeah, do we want a model that uses a local variety? Yeah, the third one is Southeast lingua franca model, and this has been talked about by some researchers such as Kirkpatrick and Seidelhofer. Should this be actually, approach be taken in the language classroom in ASEAN? So there are many different views about this, but a lot of people have said that English can be represented as an Asian lingua franca because it's spoken by all the multilingual ASEAN speakers among themselves. And therefore, this would imply that it would affect all language education and its curriculum. So what should be taught if it's considered an Asian lingua franca? And then the goal of learners is to communicate effectively with other multilinguals. So this would include taking code switching as a norm in oral communication. And the third is that testing and competence would be measured against the norms of successful Asian multilinguals, rather than against native English norms. But what does this mean? What is a successful Asian multilingual? What are the norms? Yeah? And the development of an ASEAN curriculum has been put forward, and this would include an Asian perspective of English, and it would cater to regional and globally relevant competencies and skills for the job market. So there's quite a lot of discussion about what all this would entail. Okay, then there are different views about aspirations of wanting to sound native, like, many people say it no longer exists as strongly as they did in the past. Yeah. So even in countries that used to have native speakers as teachers of English, gradually they have come to prefer, they have come to accept that you don't need to sound native-like anymore. Yeah, there's a recognition that English will become more Asian in practice, and that a more Asian perspective of second language learning and language policies is unavoidable. But then if you look at all the 10 different countries in ASEAN, there are some different roles and functions. You've got the outer circle and the expanding circle countries, yeah? And you've got different views. Yeah? For example, Waterworth did a study in 2015. He actually interviewed teachers from all the different countries in ASEAN, and he found that a large number of second language teachers of English still hold the view that the best teachers of English in Asian settings are first language teachers of English. So many of them still said that teaching English is best done by people whose first language is English. So this was a study done by Waterworth. And then Vanden Doyle also looked at the works done by Kirkpatrick and Seidelhofer and Jenkins here. And he said that, you have to look at the context of the learners, when you decide on which model or which approach you wish to take, and they should be aware that their attitudes to stigmatize accent features. This is difficult to predict how a speaker is perceived, and it is therefore perhaps undesirable to recommend their general use in any pronunciation models. So therefore, the nature of English across Southeast Asia is very diverse and variable. And you can also see that some speakers may actually opt to use the stable and creative localized forms that you find, such as Malaysian English, Singaporean English, Philippine English, because they get transported actually to other ASEAN countries, because there are many regional networks of cooperation, there's training programs, a lot of knowledge transfer is taking place in the region, a lot of training between ASEAN countries. So these varieties could also become role models actually for the countries that actually have English as a foreign language. And if you look at countries, all the different countries, even if there's no inherited English base, there are some reasonably stable features that resemble these varieties because of the shared typological features or adoption through contact. Okay, so then also what are the implications? Tensions between regional, national varieties and the desire of command of English needs to be addressed. We might say that, we should actually teach students or have a curriculum that has examples of English used in ASEAN, but we also need to look at what actually the learners want, what do they need it for, what is the target, They might not want to aspire to become, to reach the targets of the native speaker models, but they might want to be exposed to that. So you would have to ask them actually, what kind of actually English is preferred, and it's vital to distinguish between native speaker model that serves as a reference point, and it doesn't make any claims about target levels, and a native speaker target, which is not attainable to many adult learners and teachers. So all this needs to be actually discussed in the ASEAN, amongst the ASEAN policymakers and practitioners. And if the adoption of a native speaker model does not automatically imply the attainment of native speaker target, therefore the argument of the unattainable and therefore disadvantageous exonormative model loses much of its force. So because it's been said that learners in ASEAN cannot achieve native speaker targets. So if you use a native speaker model, it's not appropriate. So if you look at it that way, then that argument doesn't quite stand. So some of the advantages of endonormative models might not appeal to all ELT professionals and trainee teachers to the same degree. Some might want a model that caters to the Asian region, but different people have different views about this. And if you say that English as lingua franca is the best option for higher education institutions, as has been said by some researchers, you would still have to restrict it to semi-formal spoken context. You would still have to adopt a form of international English for writing, especially academic writing, because we have people hoping to write for international journals, people who write for the international audience, but whatever target variety is thought to be the most adequate, even the lingua franca approach cannot dissociate English from culture and pragmatic norms. So therefore, teaching and learning requires an openness to and acceptance of diversity, which may not be easy to understand. So what are the implications for pedagogy? Okay, if you look at learners' needs, learners' attitudes to other varieties of English, their ambitions in using English to communicate with different groups of interlocutors, do they wish to communicate with people from the region? Do they wish to communicate with people from outer circles, expanding circles, or even inner circles? We've got some work done by Low and Run, who stress on intelligibility and acceptability in deciding what actually should be incorporated in the language classroom, you know. And they say that if you apply the listener-dominated matrix of intelligibility to the context of ASEAN, it would imply that no one variety of varieties from one circle can be said to be dictating the norms for the varieties from the other circles. Rather, there's a need to consciously teach and learn the norms of the different varieties spoken in the region so as to communicate effectively intra-regionally and even internationally. So for this model to work effectively in ASEAN and beyond, English language course developers and instructors will have to make concerted efforts to design materials that consciously expose learners to the linguistic features of not just the outer and expanding circle varieties spoken in the ASEAN region, but also those spoken in the inner circle countries so that they can communicate effectively at the local, regional, and global levels. This looks like a very hard thing to achieve, yeah? Having to know all the different varieties and including the inner circle of English that's spoken. So this is what has been put forward by Low. So there are different attitudes and different views about actually what should be incorporated in the English language classroom in the ASEAN region itself. Huh? And then given the big difference between ASEAN countries in that English is considered one of the languages spoken by the locals, sometimes it is used only with foreigners, like in some countries like Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar, for example. And in other countries, it's used among Malaysians, it's used among Singaporeans, it's used among the Filipinos, yeah? So given such a difference, yeah, what advice can we give pedagogy in a region where English is set in multilingual context? What actually should be actually incorporated, you know, when you've got English, which has different roles and functions, and all of it set in multilingual context? Should localized forms be ignored in textbooks when they're part and parcel of what school and university students bring with them? Yeah. And if English is commonly spoken with other ASEAN speakers, then would there be common features that are regularly used by them, and should these features then be emphasized? So we need a practical and a policy response for all this. Okay, I then move on a little bit to multilingualism, as the charter says that English is the working language, and this is a status not given to any other language in the region. There has been talk that Malay should be the, recently there's been, the Prime Minister of Malaysia has put forward that Malay should be the second language of ASEAN. It's not quite clear what the second language of ASEAN means, but it's to give a bigger status to Malay in the region, given that Malay is spoken by about 300 million people in the region. It will cover Indonesia, it will cover Malaysia, it will cover southern Thailand, maybe certain communities in the Philippines, but this would then leave out a whole big group that doesn't speak Malay, you know, the CLMV region would not be able to communicate in Malay. So it is quite a debatable issue, yeah. If you compare ASEAN with the European Union, because that's the closest comparison, it's a regional bloc, yeah. In the European Union, 24 official working languages are named, yeah, and all this requires translation and interpretation services, and is very, very costly, you know, 1 billion euros or something, yeah. So, but it all then remains to be seen, whether in ASEAN, you know, with a focus on English as a working language, with the massive investments by ASEAN's member states into ELT for more than 600 million people in the region to make them all competent, is this cheaper in the long run? And also, what about losses in local languages? And if you look at the EU Council of Europe, there's an emphasis on the teaching and use of other European languages. It's put into policies and guidelines here. So will ASEAN also place an emphasis on South Asian languages in education and cross-border communication as maintained in some of the ASEAN policy plans? Is it going to be actually stipulated in policies, yeah, that we should actually be learning and put into practice, that we should be learning neighboring languages countries, yeah? Or could it give way to the geopolitical roadmap suggested by China's Belt and Road Initiative that would promote Mandarin, for example, but that's not so likely to happen. So there are many forces that affect the manifestations of English in ASEAN, and this will all have repercussions in language policies. So what is clear in all the countries is that there's a pressure to promote the national language, to have a pragmatic second language or foreign language policy. And this is seen to be in conflict with the multilingual realities that exist. What about the learning of foreign language of other countries, yeah? Or even European languages? Should that be incorporated in the curriculums of ASEAN universities or higher education or schools, yeah? Okay, so vis-a-vis English, okay, implementation, ASEAN higher education, yeah, a lot of is happening in ASEAN now in terms of higher education and all pushing the use of English. We have many projects, taking place on quality assurance, on mobility, on developing a common higher education space, yeah, interregional networking, interregional collaboration. So the status of English has to be addressed in language policies to ensure the balance of languages vis-a-vis English in its diverse societal functions. It may be practical in Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, and Philippines, but it is actually a major change in the former Indochina or the CLMV countries like Cambodia and Laos, yeah? And economic policy discourse has usually actually been placed as a priority, neglecting the rights of all other languages in a national habitat. So therefore, a national social rights discourse is necessary to complement this, leading to a more comprehensive national language policy in education. So my concluding statements are that a regional policy for English that caters to local and international needs needs to be discussed by policymakers, by practitioners, by applied linguists in the ASEAN region. I think there's been a lot of talk about what kind of English we should actually bring to the classroom, yeah, models and norms, yeah, but actually implementation and actually has not actually taken place very widely. So we need a regional policy for English that caters to local and international needs. You need to have a group of people who would come together to discuss this in depth, yeah, and to make some decisions. We need an ASEAN-wide approach towards standards, the growth of stable language features, and the appropriate English curriculum. So there's been a lot of talk about what we should do in the English language classroom, but not enough that's been put into practice. We need to look into access to English, that it is equitably distributed across the region, yeah, because we are forming an ASEAN community. We became a community in 2015. So we are actually trying to narrow the development gap between the different ASEAN countries in the region. So we need to try and ensure more equitable access to English. ASEAN actually needs to band together on the issue of access to English and ensure that no country is left behind. And unless regional governments develop holistic and coherent language education policies, it is likely that English will continue to increase its range at the expense of local and regional languages. And therefore, a regional policy to ensure that local languages do not die or lose too many domains to English needs to be discussed and actually put in place. And ASEAN needs to find a way in which English can coexist with regional languages. Thank you.
Thank you indeed for your insights in language teaching, English language teaching, especially focusing on ASEAN and its model norms. Thank you very much, Professor Hashim, for your insightful presentation. Really, we are blessed with the very new and very innovative information about ASEAN, English language, and role of other indigenous languages in education. And also we got informed about the policy of the nation, 11 nations that are the members of ASEAN. Then as I would like to just get some let's say queries from the comment box. If I get, I will read it out. First, I would like to just pick up one curiosity by Krishna Datta. I would like to read it out. Localized form of English is really an acceptable approach for teaching English, But aren't there still issues when the learners will go for higher studies or face native speakers for conversation? Will their ears be ready for understanding the native accent? Professor Hashim.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think, yeah, this is actually the debate that's taking place about which kind of English should be taught in the language classroom. I think currently majority of schools or higher education institutions teaching English still use actually books that come from England or Australia. Yeah, so actually we're still actually teaching using textbooks used by. In fact, in Malaysia, we actually are importing textbooks from England still. So there's a lot of debate about what kind of English should be incorporated. Is that kind of English so foreign to our students? Yeah. In terms of the using ELF in the classroom, I think not much material has been developed for that at all. Even to use local varieties, I mean, there's a debate of, is it the standard local variety? Is it, because you would have to think about writing that's needed to cater to a regional or international audience. So a lot of the works that people read and consult are also written in international English. So I think there still needs to be a lot of discussion about actually what kind of English can be incorporated in the classroom in the ASEAN region. To what extent can we incorporate localized English? Yeah, what kind of features can be accepted in the English language classroom? For example, maybe words which are borrowed that can be that is fine to be used. Yeah, but you also need actually to teach students. You also need to make them intelligible as well when they speak to an audience that is outside their own country. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Again, I can see one more query from chat box. Navraj Pant writes, how do you observe the future of English in multilingual ASEAN countries?
Yeah, I think in ASEAN we've got a lot of multilingualism. All the countries actually have various languages and dialects which are used. But as I mentioned just now, I think over the years, ever since, in fact, when English was made the official language of ASEAN, without much debate, yeah, it's been made the official language of ASEAN, and it's the language that's used in all ASEAN meetings. It's the language that's used in higher education collaboration. Yeah, it's the language used as a medium of instruction in almost all universities. For example, in Malaysia, it's the language in all higher education institutions. It's the language in schools in higher education institutions in Singapore, I think, and in many cases in Philippines as well, and more so in Thailand, yeah, and in other countries, because of this interregional cooperation and mobility that's taking place. Students have to use English if they want to move about from one country to another country. Yeah, so I think English has actually gained a lot of popularity, and it's become the most important second and foreign language in the region. I think the issue now is about, with the focus on English as the most important second or foreign language in every country in the region, yeah, also and now in Laos and also now in Cambodia, yeah. What then happens to other languages, which are not taught anymore or which are not given enough focus, yeah? And we are not actually learning also neighboring languages, yeah? So in the EU, there are policies to make sure that there are policies implemented that foreign language should be taught in the language class in schools and in higher education institutions. But yeah, how do we ensure that the rich multilingualism that we have in the region is actually not neglected? So that I think is the issue that we face in ASEAN.
Thank you very much. I would like to request the participants, if you have any queries, you can put your queries by unmuting yourself as well. If you are not writing on chat box, please, we have a couple of minutes remain for the next session. We can go for a discussion for almost 5 to 10 minutes more. Please. Then I couldn't get, if you have, please, you can. Otherwise, I have one query or the curiosity to ask you. As far I know that this ASEAN is the region where more than 1,200 languages are spoken, right? Multilingual region. Then if we see the scenario there, among that, just Cambodia, Thailand, and Timor, they give more priority to local languages as a medium of instruction, as I have studied. And Philippines, Brunei, and some other countries, they have given importance to English language as a medium to teach subject science and mathematics, like that. And if we see the policy of Singapore, we can say Singapore has mandated English to be the medium of instruction for all subjects, right? This sort of regional language to national language and the English, how could these nations incorporate the indigenous languages, or let's languages which are not developed very much in terms of its vocabulary and other things? How do they address these languages into the mainstream education, either as a medium of instruction or in other formats? I would like to just get some ideas from you.
Yes. I think that is something that all the countries are looking at the moment. I think you can, if you look at the works that's been done on language policies and indigenous languages and minority languages, there's been quite a bit of discussion about how do you actually try and actually promote some of the languages in the different countries, because there's so many languages, in all the different countries in ASEAN. For example, in Malaysia, we've got the indigenous community, the Orang Asli community, and there are some efforts to try and actually make sure that the languages all don't die out. So in schools, it's a policy in the Ministry of Education. We've got schools actually teaching some of these indigenous languages, not many, but they're teaching a few of them. And in some places where the students actually make up a big population of the school community, that language, like from in East Malaysia, those mother tongue languages are actually taught in the classroom. And I think as a medium of instruction, Malay usually it's a national language or English. That's usually the case, a national language or English. But I think there are efforts here and there, like in the Philippines has done quite a bit in terms of mother tongue based multilingual education, using students' mother tongue as a medium of instruction in primary schools. And I know Vietnam has done quite a bit on that as well, and Thailand also, because Southern Thailand, I think they speak mostly Malay and also other languages and dialects. So there are efforts across the region, but perhaps not enough at the moment. There's some efforts to try and ensure that students who might be disadvantaged, if they go to school because they don't know the national language, they don't know English, so they go to schools and they're taught in either the national language or English, and they're not able to follow at all. So there are efforts to try and actually use the mother tongues of these students in some of the classrooms in some parts of ASEAN. So there are efforts actually to do this, but perhaps not enough because it's either national language or English.
Thank you. And one more curiosity, how effective are the mother tongue based multilingual education programs there? Especially in Philippines, how effective they are there?
Yeah, how effective actually, I'm not sure. I haven't actually read about the effectiveness of these programs, but I know that they have been implemented, and I think they have seen positive outcomes. Exactly. In terms that students who come in, with no knowledge of the national language or English would be able to understand what's being spoken in the classroom when they enter school. So I'm sure that it would be a positive motivation.
Exactly. Thank you. And we have one more curiosity in chat works. What would be the ways for balancing between Indo-normative models of exonormative models of pedagogy for creating coexistence relation of English with regional languages? Then this question from Dhammar Singh South.
Yeah, I think to balance the endonormative and exonormative models, I think that's something that has been discussed by applied linguists and practitioners in ASEAN and some agreement that has to be come about. And I think it is possible to actually come up with suggestions for the whole region, because at the moment, actually, there's a lot that's being done, you know, within ASEAN itself. There's a lot of interregional cooperation taking place. So I believe that, you know, that if a group of people come together and discuss actually, how do you balance between endonormative and exonormative norms? Yeah, what could you actually bring into the language classrooms from local languages or localized Englishes? What is acceptable in spoken English, and what should actually be taught in written English? I think these should all be discussed to come up with a balance between the two.
Yes, yes. Now there is one more question he would like to ask just orally. Please, Nani Babu sir, Nani Babu Gimire, you can unmute yourself and ask the question if you have.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I would like to ask a question to Hashim. Actually, I'm also doing a research regarding medium of instruction, English medium instruction in rural community school of Nepal. And what I find that most of the people are so keen interested towards English. Actually, they have very keen interest towards English medium instruction. Even the people of ethnic group or the minorities, they want to teach their children in English medium of instruction, not in their own language. They would not like to teach their children in their minorities language or their mother tongue in school education. Instead, they are interested to teach their children in English medium instruction. And we educated people and we scholars are saying that if you don't teach the children in mother tongue in the beginning level, their cognitive level will be damaged or they will be weak students. Why the people are so curious, so interested to teach their children in English medium from the beginning classes? Yes, and then what is the trend there in rural village in ASEAN countries? Is there the same situation like Nepal there, or it is different? I would like to ask this question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would believe that we have the same, we have similar tendencies in ASEAN as well, because I think parents are always pushing, wanting the children to actually do well, and they see English as the language that will actually get the children to where they want them to be. Yeah? They can see the economic gains, yeah, of learning English, but I think if it is a disadvantage actually for many who come from different communities and who don't actually speak the national language or English, for them to start school immediately in those languages. And quite often, I think they would be left behind. So parents maybe, I mean, yeah, they want what's best for the children, but I think we have to actually look at what is best for the children themselves, for these children who come from communities that don't speak the national language or English at home. And I would think that starting off with the mother tongue language initially, and then slowly moving them on to the national and English language would be actually something that would be actually ideal for these children. So, I mean, there is that usual, you know, I think we face the same issue, the same problem. Parents would always, of course, push the children to learn English and yeah, they see that as the key to economic achievements, economic developments and achievements.
Thank you. I can see one more hand raise from the participants. Could you please, Krishna Prasad Adhikari sir, can you put your queries and curiosity to her?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, giving me the place for putting my query. Actually, what I wanted to know that how the language policy is connected with the different policy of the nation. For example, the financial policy or the the foreign policy and others, different type of the policy. As I see, the Philippines government had developed the language policy corresponding with the other different type of the policy. And then in the case of the ASEAN country, However, they are interrelated each other due to their linguistic and others common features, but they are adopting the different type of the linguistic language policy. And how a nation develop a language policy, connecting it with other different type of the policy, and what is its aim to do that? That's my query.
Yeah, I think at the moment we don't have a regional language policy, which I think would be good to actually have a general language policy in the region. At the moment, the policies are all national policies. And if you look at what's happened in the last so many years, in terms of national language policies, you can see mostly the choice of the national language as official language. And also you have English as the second language or the most important foreign language. So in general, I think you can see that is the development that's taken place in all ASEAN countries. In terms of multilingual language education, I think multilingualism, I think some countries have come up with their own policies, but I'm not so sure if all countries have got policies for maintaining multilingualism yet. I think, I'm not so sure whether I got your question. Yeah. So there's no regional policy at the moment, but I think it would be useful to have actually a regional policy in terms of that would actually try and protect multilingualism in the region. What we see in general now is the promotion of the national language and English in all countries. So in the end, you would have people who are bilinguals, people who can speak the national language and the English language, but not other languages. That would also be important as well to know, especially neighboring languages. Yeah, foreign languages also are important. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your very insightful ideas and addressing the issues raised here. If we have time, I can pick up some more queries and curiosities if you have. Otherwise, we can conclude the session. No more, I think. It's done. Okay, finally, thank you indeed for your insightful presentation on English language in ASEAN and modes and models that you have discussed today. We all participants and scholars have got very rich insights from your presentation about English language, the role of English language education, medium of instruction, as well as mother tongue based multilingual education in the nation that you have just raised here. And finally, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude and thanks for your very important time and sharing your important ideas to us, and we hope such ideas to share in this platform again in the future. Thank you very much, Azirah Hashim, for your valuable time, and thank you all the participants for your engaged participation in the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Now over to you, Janak Negi sir.